Serious? Have you or someone you know ever been sent to a boot camp for troubled teens? If so, what are your experiences? My brother got sent to a very strict boarding school for troubled youth. You started with nothing, not even shoes, and you can level up for more privileges. The first one he went to was near Mexico, but it was shut down once they found they were beating the kids. Then he went to one in one of the middle of the country states. That combined with my parents' efforts to keep him out of legal trouble. He lives a good life, but he's no longer in contact with the family. Very bitter about it, but the family is still abusive, so I don't blame him. My older brother had a friend who was sent to some summer camp for troubled teens. It was out in a Nevada desert somewhere, so they had no options or escape from the place. Apparently, it did nothing but make him hate his parents even more, and he left the house at 18 and cut off all ties to his parents. The last my brother or I heard of him was around 3 years after he left his parents' house. Still wasn't talking to them and was working full time at a sandwich shop. Cousin was sent to a military academy, basically a boarding school for kids with discipline problems. He's in his 40s now and has been in prison multiple times, so that didn't really work out. My brother went into boot camp. He was a very troubled kid. The only crimes he was ever arrested for were assaults. He ended up killing his 3 roommates and taking a college dorm hostage with his ex-girlfriend and her roommates in there. He wanted to kill her but just shot her in the foot before getting shot and killed by police. This is background. He had been arrested many times for assault and they always put him on probation. After the 3rd or 4th time they decided they would try boot camp. He excelled there. It wasn't long before he was the platoon leader and in a position of control of the others. He was the one always making sure guys followed through with chores, wake-ups, PT, and whatever else. He did so well that his probation was cut short after he got out. He came back home with a goal to join the Air Force. 3 months later he is arrested again for viciously assaulting someone. Because he wasn't on probation, they couldn't just put him in jail, so they put him in Outward Bound. They take troubled kids out in the forest and teach them to live off the land. It's basically forest survival a la Bear Grylls, without the camera crew, with only enough safety net that they don't die. What it really is doing is teaching future fugitives how to avoid the police and survive in nature. Once again he excelled and graduated top of his class in a leadership role. He is around 17 at this point. He gets out and they don't take away his probation this time. He is mad but deals with it. One night a few months later he sees a random Egyptian dude walking around our town, extremely small so we don't get a lot of foreigners here, and attacks him. He beats the holy crap out of the guy, breaks a bottle over his face and threatens to kill him, all while yelling racial slurs. So he is arrested and charged with a hate crime. Sentenced to 3 years in juvenile hall. He served 1, was out 5-6 months when the killing happened. Conclusion, I'll later remember reading that boot camps fell out of favor due to lack of efficacy for rehabilitation. The people that excelled were people that used the power structure to victimize others, as it turns out later happened with my brother. Several guys came forward after his death saying they feared for their lives with him due to threats and intimidation. I know there were some that got benefit out of it, but some people can't be saved. I think your brother had a legitimate psychological disorder. Boot camps don't do well to resolve those issues. My cousin went to one, came back super aggressive and with a major drinking problem. Once he tried to work on that due to a DUI, he became overly religious but still very aggressive. A friend's boyfriend got sent to a religious one junior year. He said it was for weed, but who knows. He came home on a day pass after a few months and immediately ran away. He hid in his girlfriend's barn for a few days and then hitchhiked out of town. When I left town 10 years later, no one had heard from him. The summer after my freshman year of high school, my best friend disappeared. She had been going through a lot emotionally, suicidal, dabbling in drugs, fighting with her mom, all that. Her mom wasn't equipped to be a mother, unfortunately, and she was very religious, so instead of getting my best friend the help that she needed, she would take her to the pastor of their church, who suggested a boot camp. So her mom signed her parental rights away to one of those troubled teens boot camp schools. They showed up in the middle of the night, kicked down her bedroom door and took her without any explanation. She thought she was being kidnapped. They put a black bag over her head and handcuffed her. not speaking to her at all. They helicoptered her to the nearest airport and flew her to Utah to a school called Cross Creek. She wasn't allowed out until she was 18 because she was not progressing through the levels of the program fast enough, and you aren't allowed any visitors or breaks until you are at one of the last levels. So she lived in heck for around 2 years, give or take, without any sort of communication with her world. When she was there, she wasn't allowed to look out windows, use eating utensils, pencils, pens, anything that could harm her body. She wasn't allowed to make eye contact with anyone longer than 3 seconds. If she did any of these things, they were called infractions and she would go down a level in the program. I don't remember how many levels there were, but she never matriculated out. They convinced her that she was a full-fledged alcoholic and drug addict, and that she belonged in jail. Before she was at Cross Creek, she was a straight A student. When she got out, she had to go on homeschool because A, she had such bad PTSD from being institutionalized, and B, her academics were so far behind that there was no way she could keep up or graduate in a normal classroom setting. Upon getting out, she was taken to a real psychologist and was diagnosed bipolar, hence the drugs and suicide attempts. It took her years to become the life-loving, successful and happy woman that I know and love today. Her mom, as a matter of fact, was recently diagnosed autistic, and I do not mean to sound judgy, but it explains quite a lot. That's fricked up. I had a friend from church who was sent to one of those pray away the gay camps after he came out to his folks. Luckily for him, it wasn't one of the bad ones. A lot of focus on living a godly life, and he told me there was very little discussion of homosexuality. Mostly it was just outdoors stuff and Bible study. It sounded more like the church camps we had been to together growing up. He did say it was pretty stupid to send a gay frisky teenager to a camp filled with other gay frisky teenagers. He seemed pretty unperturbed by the whole thing, although he was mad at his folks for a long time and went to live with his brother for the rest of high school. Thanks to his experience, I didn't think the anti-gay camps sounded so bad until I was informed of just how awful they can be. It wasn't a boot camp, but when I was 15 or 16, my mom put me in some kind of scared straight program that the local sheriffs hosted. I had bad grades, but I was also taking classes at community college and getting A's. No criminal record. Worked. Paid rent. I really don't know why she thought I should go to this thing. It was a 3 or 4 day long thing. They took us to juvie, which most of the other kids in the program had been in before. They took us to the county lockup, where some inmates told us about how crappy their lives are. They took us to the county hospital to show us homeless people and junkies. And they took us to the coroner's offices to show us dead people, all of whom presumably had dead or died in some bathroom. They also showed us some dare videos, and some red asphalt type videos about why we shouldn't drink and drive. I generally challenge authority, but had a healthy respect for people who were just doing their job. So when some sheriff kept telling me to get clean about my drug usage and drinking, after I had told him a million times I didn't, and still don't, do drugs and I didn't drink at the time, I asked him if I could try some. Got me a timeout. I also asked if they could page my uncle when we were in the county lockup. They thought I was being a smart butt, but my uncle was actually there at the time. I had visited him a few weeks before. Anyhow, I did enjoy parts of it, mostly the coroner's bureau stuff. I made a friend there who was in and out of juvie, and didn't even go to my school. Last time I heard about him, he had shot and killed someone during an armed robbery and was looking at life in a big boy jail. So really it just exposed me to people I shouldn't have been hanging out with. Taught me how to do drugs by showing me a video of people doing drugs, and I missed out on 4 days of school, further impacting my poor grades. My friend was sent to her senior year of high school. It seemed to be good for her. She seemed to be clean for the first time in years. When she returned, her aunt, who raised her, told her she could only choose between enlisting and moving back with her prostitute, drug addict mother. She wanted to go to college, not enlist, so she was forced to move back with her mom. We don't talk much anymore, but from Facebook and news stories I know she's addicted to M, was an accomplice in a bank robbery, and is dating a man 20 years older than her. Dang, that's such a crappy ultimatum to give to a teen, especially because she wanted to eventually go to college. The entire reason I got on Reddit was to expose the horrific treatment facility my parents sent me to when I was 17. My post is archived but received a lot of attention from parents and recovering troubled teen industry friends afterwards. When you search Eva Carston Academy on Google, it used to be one of the top hits. I've literally never been more proud of something because there was absolutely no info on the place prior to that post. It's an amateur and enraged piece of writing, but it's definitely worth a read if you want a raw inside look on what those kinds of programs are like. My goal is to raise awareness around this entire industry so that more children will be safe from the abuse and destruction. My friend went to a boys' boot camp. They pretty much broke him and trained him to become a Marine. Got out, became a Marine. Now has PTSD and smokes M pretty frequently. From what people have told me, it's freaking horrible. A kid will die every few years in the state I'm in due to dehydration or exhaustion. They must have dang good lawyers if a kid dies every few years and they haven't been shut down yet. My aunt sent my nephew to one for what was supposed to be like 3 months. They sent him back after 2 weeks because he refused to cooperate. I guess they can handle kids getting violent, but they can't handle a kid saying no and refusing to do anything. Yeah, the trick is most people won't start the violence, so being a sloth is harder for them to manage than someone who initiates violence. I am the sloth. So I was sent to a place called MT Carmel in Wyoming. They have since been shut down for doing a whole bunch of illegal stuff. You can Google them. I was there for 6 months, and the only way I was able to leave is that after 6 months, one of the staff, during a supervised phone call, allowed me to tell the truth to my parents about what was going on. Prior to that, they screened any letters I sent, so I wasn't able to explain to them what was really going on. The parents and the state paid this place per boy per day, so it was in their interest to keep us there. Once I explained to my dad what had happened since I got there, he told me he would be there the following Monday to get me. We lived in CA and I was in WY at this place. There's way too much to type here about how that place operated, the stuff that went on, but I am happy to answer questions. One crazy thing is that the week I got there, 3 boys took shovels to a staff member's head and tried to escape. Each of them are serving life in WY currently. I heard 3 80-year sentences each, and rightfully so, because that's awful. I was 15 when I went, but I knew guys there who were 18-19 because staff called their parents and said if their parents flew them home, gave them money to get home, their kids would end up doing the same stuff. They pretty much exploited the parents' fear of not keeping their kids safe. That being said, these places are certainly not all bad, and I'm sure a bunch of them do a lot of good for teenagers, their families. Also, if anyone here is familiar with where I was, who knows small word, that staff member was fired right after I left because I'm sure they figured out he let me tell my parents what was going on. I've always wanted to thank him for what he did. He knew crap was not right but told me if he tried to do anything they would fire him instantly. He was a major lifesaver. I wish I could find him now. I never knew his last name because we called all the staff Mr. First name. His name was Mr. Scotty. Great guy. I tried looking them up and just found monks. I'd love to find an article. Your story is fascinating. About the place. Both my brothers went when we were kids. My older brother has since gone on to join the Navy, got married to a wonderful girl who is pursue a bachelor's degree in a very high paying field that luckily enough would likely work almost exclusively with the govt contractors. He decided he hated the Navy. Once his contract was up, joined the army and has never been happier. They have 2 income producing houses back home that they rent out and are expecting a kid in April. My younger brother, however, came back and seemed to be doing better, but at 16 knocked up his 14-year-old girlfriend, then knocked up another girl at 18. He married that one, but has since knocked up 2 other girls. He joined the army too, but has already had multiple Article 15s, one for sleeping with a fellow soldier's wife. My brother has got much worse. His temperament changed from being slightly perturbed to very angry at the world. He made some friends though. You'll rarely find a modern child development psychologist that agreed with boot camps like these. For very few kids they work, but typically put a bunch of angry troublemakers together and they'll all just feed off each other and hate their circumstances. Especially if you're dealing with something related to oppositional defiant disorder or early antisocial. Several of my friends growing up were sent to Lifeline when they were kids. They all seemed to resent the experience on some level, and they all formed a bond of partying into their adulthood, regardless if they became mentors at Lifeline or not. My observation from hearing them talk at parties is that they seem to distrust their parents. My thoughts are that while the Lifeline system was a replacement for good parenting, it wasn't a great replacement, and the end result is these kids were able to relate to each other about their bad family lives. My best friend got out and did even harder drugs with even worse people. She was P at the world and it's been forever since I've seen her. Miss her a lot. Used to write her letters every week but then they didn't accept those anymore. I had a friend that did because his parents didn't like his form of rebellion. It fricked him up pretty badly. The older kids would try and beat the crap out of the younger ones, so the younger Barak would have to take sleep shifts to keep watch. He has some fairly severe PTSD, sleeps with a gun and will wake up aiming it if an unexpected sound dream wakes him up. It also led to him being cruel sometimes. Usually he was a very good man, kind and good-natured, but in part due to his experience that humanity could switch off and he'd be incredibly non-empathic and malicious to even those he cared for. Hence why we're not friends anymore. I cared deeply for him, but I cared about myself and my own emotional well-being more. My brother went when I was in high school. I was in 9th grade, so he was 17 at the time. My uncle and bake weed cookies and bring them up to him once a month and never got caught for it. We'd always have a picnic when we went to visit. I DK about the rest of his experiences, but it must not have done any good. He's the biggest frick up ever. At age 32, dude has 4 kids, doesn't support 2 of them, multiple DUIs and can't keep a job worth a frick. I did. I was 16 and not doing well in high school. Wasn't a super bad kid. No criminal record. Just had very little interest in listening to anyone with authority. I dropped out of high school and went to a 6-month resident program. Nearly every state has them. They're called Challenge Academy. Very strict. Lots of physical activity. Other than a 10-minute phone call on Sunday and letters. No contact with the outside world. No TV, newspapers, magazines, internet, socializing, etc. I learned a lot there. They try and teach you things like self-respect, reliance, confidence, responsibility, stuff like that. After that I joined the Navy as a photographer, probably one of the best gigs you can get. Got out, got a degree at a pretty solid state university, and now have a federal job. Didn't turn out so bad. Going there was probably one of the best choices I made in hindsight. Sure didn't feel like it at the time. Yep, he was in 9th grade. He smoked a lot of weed behind his mom's back but was a good kid. His parents organized the whole fake kidnapping deal where 2 big men took him in the middle of the night and flew him to live out in the wilderness in Nevada for a few months. He didn't need to be there. Everyone else was a drug addict or some next level crap. He met a pimp. I heard about parents who go that far too, and I don't blame anyone if they hate their parents after going through something like that. My brother was having serious academic and behavior problems and went to a boarding military school for 1.5 years in high school. It may be that his experience is different than many other commenters here because he agreed to go, but it did wonders for him, and he wound up having a great life. Some people respond well to discipline, others don't. Part of it is TV, though. They paint military schools as essentially boot camp for kids, when it's more like a strict live-in private school. My brother was sent to an actual military school because the path he was headed down would have led to incarnation or death. I followed him there of my own volition. I was the good kid. He has turned out to be one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. He's successful, has a wonderful family. I, on the other hand, have been a homeless veteran, twice divorced. My daughters speak to me on occasion. I work in retail and I'm a borderline alcoholic with PTSD and depression. Your experiences may vary. Interesting. I'm a veteran. I'm on my 4th and last. I got it right this time. Wife. And I should have been homeless at least twice. I'm also a borderline alcoholic. I work in retail and have CPTSD. Court-ordered therapy saved my butt. It really did. My youngest brother had some serious drug issues when he was 16-17 years old. We initially sent him to a rehab facility but he got kicked out after he assaulted a counselor during an attempted escape. The judge gave him a choice. Jail or wilderness camp? He chose the wilderness camp. He loved it. He spent the rest of his time hiking through the mountains and learning survival skills. He came back home sober with a newfound love for the outdoors. He's had a few hiccups with his sobriety over the years, but for the most part he's a fully functional adult with a wife and 2 kids. I went to a scared straight kind of deal in 8th grade. I was giving tons of trouble in middle school, and the school got with my parents and decided it was best to send me to the program for a day. The school rounded up a bus full of troublemakers and sent us to the local prison. Unfortunately, our chaperone was a very attractive English teacher who got gawked at non-stop from inmates. I still remember vividly when they had an inmate come out and talk to us. Throughout his entire speech his eyes were fixed on my good friend, Brian. During the inmate's speech, he paused and just stared at him. He opened up his mouth and said, "I'm gonna put those Skittles on your lips if you come in here, boy." None of us knew what it meant at the time, but we for sure knew it couldn't be good. He noticed how confused we were and told us what he meant by it, stating, "What these boys do in here is roleplay. That's what you gotta do when you haven't seen a lady in a while. I tell you to hold those Skittles in your hands until they're warm enough and the color comes off, and then we dress you up. We use the different color Skittles for eyeshadow and lipstick. I'm gonna put those Skittles on you, boy." It was at this very moment I knew I had to. My best friend through high school was sent to one for around 6 months by his terrible parents. He was the first of 3 kids and the parents made a point to let him know he was an accident. He was way too smart for his own good, so he would get bored. He would get in trouble, but not real legal trouble. Just teachers and other adults who didn't want to put forth the effort. Up until he could move out he was parented from a pill bottle because, again, he was a mistake and the parents didn't want to deal with it. He was sent away at the end of our sophomore year of HS. It was basically survival camp in Colorado. The issue with sending him to a troubled youth camp is the other troubled youth. Before he left he was a clean-cut nerd with aspirations of a career in technology. He would rather program than play video games. The other kids at camp introduced him to everything you need to ruin your life. This was the icing on the crap cake. His parents made him miss the last month of 10th grade and the first 2 months of 11th in order to send him to that camp. So by winter break he was behind on school and couldn't catch up. He ended up dropping out entirely after winter break. He waited until he was 18 to start attending community college since he didn't have a HS diploma. He almost made it 2 semesters, but he couldn't keep his crap together. When I checked on him a few years ago, he couldn't hold down a minimum wage job. He turned into a severe racist. He's been arrested multiple times and attempts to drink himself to death every Christmas. We are both 30 now, and his life was ruined by that camp. TLDR. Hurting a troubled youth around other troubled youth will only cause more problems. I was sent to one when I was 16. It was called 3-Dimensional Life. I was addicted to drugs, crack Xanax, so I can understand why my parents did what they did. I hated it. It was like army boot camp. They made us group up to carry felled trees up and down hills. They brought in a dump truck of gravel and we would move the gravel in buckets from one pile to another back and forth for 5 hours a day, raking dirt, chopping wood. I actually loved chopping wood, it's satisfying. The worst part about it though was that the place was completely bibliothumping Christian. I was told that prayer and Bible study would cure my addiction and suicidal tendencies. I was also told that if I did not accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior I would die an addict and never be successful in life. For the first 3 months I was allowed no contact with my parents. The only time we left property was to go to this crazy Pentecostal snake charming church 3 times a week. It was an 11-month program but my parents pulled me out at 5 months. Which is saying a lot because my parents are bibliothumping Southern fundamentalist Christians. I had a friend of mine get sent to the infamous Teen Challenge and holy crap some of the stuff they made him do there for 15 months straight. They hired some straight up goons to come into his house and zip tie him in his sleep at 3 AM and drag him into a car without telling him what was happening or where he was going or how long he would be there. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.